The late afternoon sun hung low over the suburban sprawl of Willow Creek, Georgia, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and freshly cut grass. But for 72-year-old Clara Thompson, the world felt sharp and hostile. Her hands, weathered but steady, gripped the steering wheel of her 1998 Buick LeSabre, its faded blue paint gleaming dully under the sunlight. Clara's deep brown eyes, which had seen war's brutality and humanity's fleeting kindness, stared straight ahead as the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser filled her rearview mirror. "License and registration, ma'am. Step out of the car." The voice of Officer Derek Lawson cut through the stillness like a blade, cold and edged with impatience. At 29, Lawson carried himself with the swagger of unchecked authority, his badge glinting on his chest like a medal he hadn't earned. His pale blue eyes narrowed as he sized up Clara, standing barely 5 feet tall in her worn cardigan and sensible shoes. To him, she was just an old woman in a beat-up car, 4 blocks from the modest ranch house she'd called home for 35 years. But to Clara, this moment was a battlefield, one she'd faced too many times before. Clara's heart thudded, not with fear but with a bone-deep weariness. She'd survived jungles and gunfire, carried the weight of lives saved and lost, yet here she was, judged by a man half her age, who saw only her skin and her car's rust. She met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. "Officer, may I ask why I've been pulled over?" Her voice was soft, tempered by decades of discipline, but it carried the quiet strength of someone who'd stared down worse than him. Lawson smirked, his lips curling with condescension. "Suspicious driving, ma'am. This vehicle matches the description of one tied to some break-ins around here." He leaned closer, his shadow falling over her. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Grandma?" The word dripped with mockery, a deliberate jab meant to belittle. Clara's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Slurs hurled in the heat of war, whispers of doubt in rooms where she'd been the only black woman. This was just another test of her resolve. "Officer, I assure you there's been a mistake. This is my car, and I'm on my way to pick up my grandson from school." Her words were measured, each one chosen to diffuse the tension crackling between them. Lawson scoffed, unimpressed. "That's what they all say. Folks like you always have a story." The unspoken accusation hung heavy, laced with racial bias. "Folks like you." Clara knew exactly what he meant, and it stung like salt in an old wound, but she held his gaze, her dignity a shield against his hostility. Lawson circled the Buick, his boots crunching on the asphalt. He tapped the hood with his knuckles as if the car itself offended him. "This heap doesn't exactly scream upstanding citizen, does it?" he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Clara's fingers tightened on her purse where her license and registration sat neatly organized. She handed them over, her movements deliberate. Lawson snatched the documents, holding her driver's license up to the light with theatrical suspicion. "Clara Thompson, huh? Ever been in trouble before, Clara?" He drawled her name, his tone designed to intimidate. "No, officer. Never in my life." Her voice didn't waver, though his scrutiny burned. Lawson's eyes flicked over her, searching for a crack in her composure. Finding none, he grew visibly irritated. "We'll see about that," he said, turning to his radio with a flourish. "Dispatch running a check on a Clara Thompson, elderly black female blue Buick." Subjects acting uncooperative. The lie was blatant, meant to paint her as guilty to anyone listening. Clara's chest tightened, but she stood taller, her years of service anchoring her against his petty tyranny. The radio crackled as Lawson waited, his smug grin faltering when Clara spoke again. "Officer, may I ask what specific grounds you have for detaining me? I've provided my documents. I've broken no laws." Her question was calm but pointed, a challenge wrapped in courtesy. Lawson's face reddened. "My grounds are that I'm doing my job, ma'am. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He stepped closer, invading her space, his hand resting on his holster. The gesture wasn't lost on Clara. She had seen men like him before, small souls wielding power like a club. Lawson's gaze landed on a small, polished mahogany box resting on the passenger seat. It was unassuming, its surface worn smooth by years of careful handling. "What's in the box, Clara?" His voice hardened, demanding. Clara's hand instinctively moved to cover the latch, her expression unyielding. Personal effects, she said firmly. Lawson's eyes narrowed. I'll be the judge of that. He reached for the box, his fingers brushing the wood before Clara's voice stopped him cold. That box is private, officer. You have no right to touch it without cause. Lawson's sneer returned, uglier now. Playing difficult, are we? He unhooked his handcuffs, the metal glinting in the fading light. Maybe a trip to the station will loosen your tongue. Clara's heart raced, but her face remained a mask of resolve. She'd faced worse odds. Mortars raining down, soldiers bleeding out under her care. On this man, with his badge and his bias, was no match for her spirit. Just then, Lawson's radio crackled, sharp and urgent. Unit 19, status on that name check. Thompson, Clara, M, confirm. Lawson rolled his eyes, annoyed. Standby dispatch, dealing with an uncooperative subject. But before he could continue, a new voice cut through, crisp and commanding. Unit 19, this is Chief Samuel Carter. Confirm the individual, Clara M. Thompson, elderly, African-American, female, blue Buick. Lawson froze, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Yes, Chief. That's her. Why? Carter's voice came back, tight with barely restrained emotion. Hold your current action, Officer Lawson. Do not proceed with any search or arrest. I'm en route. ETA 2 minutes. Acknowledge. The command left no room for argument. Lawson stammered. Acknowledge, Chief, his bravado crumbling. He shot Clara a wary glance, as if seeing her for the first time. What was it about this woman that had the chief of police himself racing to the scene? Sweat beaded on his brow as the siren grew louder, closing in fast. Moments later, a black department SUV screeched to a halt, its lights flashing discreetly. Chief Samuel Carter, a towering figure with a chest full of commendations and a reputation for zero tolerance, stepped out. His dark eyes locked onto Clara, ignoring Lawson entirely. The air shifted, charged with a tension that made Lawson shrink back. Carter strode toward Clara, his face a mask of grim determination. Lawson sensed with a sickening certainty that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Carter stopped before Clara, his demeanor softening. He drew himself to full height, then, to Lawson's stunned horror, snapped a crisp salute. Ma'am, his voice boomed with reverence, Major Thompson, it's an honor, though I'm ashamed of these circumstances. Lawson's jaw dropped. Major Thompson. The words hit like a thunderclap. Carter's gaze turned to Lawson, cold and unforgiving. Officer, do you have any idea who this woman is? Lawson shook his head, his face ashen. Carter's voice was low, dangerous. This is Major Clara M. Thompson, United States Army retired, recipient of the Silver Star for valor in Iraq. She saved my brother's life in Fallujah and countless others, a hero in every sense of the word. The weight of his words crushed Lawson. He stared at Clara, the cardigan, the old car, the quiet dignity, and saw none of it hinted at the warrior beneath. The mahogany box on the seat now felt sacred, likely holding her medal or memories of her service. Carter's voice cracked like a whip. You dared to treat her with such disrespect, Lawson. You saw an old black woman in a rusty car and thought you could bully her. Clara watched, her expression composed but tinged with a deep sadness. Carter turned back to her, his tone softening. Major, I apologize on behalf of this department. This is inexcusable. He gestured sharply for Lawson to step forward. Officer Lawson, you will apologize to Major Thompson. Now, Lawson stumbled forward, his arrogance gone. Major Thompson, ma'am, he choked out, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I was wrong, terribly wrong. My actions, there's no excuse. Clara met his gaze, her eyes piercing but kind. Learn from this young man, she said softly, her words carrying the weight of a lifetime. See people for who they are, not what you assume. Carter assured Claire that Lawson would face consequences, disciplinary action, and mandatory retraining. This department will do better, he vowed, escorting her back to her car. As she settled into the driver's seat, he glanced at the mahogany box. The box, Major, he asked gently. Clara nodded, a faint smile breaking through. Taking it to show my grandson what service means. As Clara drove away, the weight of the encounter lingered. Lawson stood frozen, Carter's words echoing in his mind. He'd misjudged a hero, and the shame burned deep. For Clara, the incident was a reminder of battles still fought on foreign soil and hometown streets. But her dignity, forged in fire, shone brighter than ever. In Willow Creek, whispers of the encounter spread, a testament to the quiet courage of a woman who'd never sought the spotlight, but carried honor in her soul. Chapter 2, Shadows of Valor. The twilight deepened over Willow Creek, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. Clara Thompson's Buick LeSabre rolled slowly down Maple Street, its engine humming softly as she navigated the familiar route to her grandson's school. But the weight of the earlier encounter with Officer Derek Lawson clung to her like a second skin. Her hands, steady as ever, gripped the wheel, but her heart churned with a quiet storm of emotions. Anger, sorrow, and a bone-deep fatigue that no metal could ease. The mahogany box on the passenger seat seemed to pulse with unspoken stories, its polished surface catching the last rays of daylight. Clara's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, flicked to it briefly. She whispered to herself, "Keep going, Clara, for him." At Carver Elementary, 10-year-old Marcus Carter waited on the school's front steps, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. His bright eyes scanned the street, unaware of the battle his grandmother had just endured. Named after Clara's brother who'd never come home from Iraq, Marcus was her anchor, her reason to rise each morning despite the world's cruelties. She pulled into the lot, forcing a smile as Marcus bounded toward the car, his sneakers slapping the pavement. "Mama Clara," he called, his voice a burst of light in her shadowed world. But as he climbed into the back seat, his grin faded. "You okay? You look sad." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to shield him from the truth, to preserve the innocence in his wide, curious eyes. "Just a long day, sugar," she said, her voice soft but strained. Marcus frowned, unconvinced, but didn't press. Instead, he pointed to the mahogany box. "You brought it. Are you going to tell me about it today?" Clara's heart ached. She'd promised to share the story of her silver star with him, to teach him what courage meant. But now, the memory of Lawson's sneer, his handcuffs glinting, made her hesitate. Could she tell Marcus about valor when the world still saw her as less? Back at the Willow Creek Police Department, Officer Derek Lawson sat in the break room, his hands trembling around a styrofoam cup of cold coffee. Chief Samuel Carter's words echoed in his skull like a relentless drum. "You dared to treat her with such disrespect." Lawson's face burned with shame, but beneath it simmered a flicker of defiance. He hadn't known she was a hero. How could he? She was just an old woman in a junker car. Yet the image of Clara's unyielding gaze, her quiet dignity, gnawed at him. He tossed the cup into the trash and stormed out, desperate to escape the weight of his mistake. Meanwhile, Chief Carter stood in his office, staring at a framed photo on his desk. It showed a younger version of himself, arm in arm with his brother, Sergeant James Carter, in Fallujah. James, who'd come home alive because of Clara Thompson's courage under fire. Carter's jaw clenched as he recalled Lawson's radio call, labeling Clara uncooperative. The injustice of it ignited a fury he rarely let surface. He picked up the phone and dialed the mayor's office. "We need to talk about reform," he said, his voice low and resolute. "This can't happen again." Clara and Marcus arrived at their modest home, a single-story house with peeling paint and a garden bursting with roses Clara tended with care. Inside, the living room was a shrine to her past. Photos of her in uniform, a folded American flag in a glass case, and letters from soldiers she'd saved. Marcus dropped his backpack and beelined for the couch, patting the seat next to him. "Come on, Mama Clara. Tell me about the box." His eagerness tugged at her, but the day's wounds were still raw. She sat slowly, the mahogany box in her lap, her fingers tracing its edges. "Marcus," she began, her voice trembling, "this box holds something important, but it's more than a medal. It's a promise." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes wide. Clara's gaze drifted to a photo on the wall. Her platoon in Iraq, their faces grim but determined. She swallowed hard. "I was a nurse. You know that. But one day, in a place called Fallujah, everything changed. Her voice cracked as memories flooded back. The deafening roar of mortars, the screams of the wounded, the blood soaking her hands as she dragged a soldier to safety. I was scared, Marcus, so scared, but I couldn't stop. People needed me. Marcus's eyes glistened, sensing the weight of her words. You saved them, didn't you? He whispered. Clara nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I tried, but today, she paused, her breath hitching. Today, someone looked at me and saw nothing but an old woman who didn't belong. They didn't see the lives I saved. They didn't see me. Her voice broke, and Marcus threw his arms around her, his small body trembling. You're a hero, Mama Clara, he sobbed. Why would anyone be mean to you? Clara held him close, her tears falling freely now. The pain of Lawson's prejudice, the sting of being reduced to a stereotype, poured out in quiet sobs. She'd fought for her country, risked everything, yet still faced suspicion in her own hometown. The injustice was a wound deeper than any she'd sustained in war. Sometimes, sugar, she whispered, people judge what they don't understand. But we keep going. We keep showing them who we are. Across town, Lawson's patrol car idled in a deserted lot. He stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, hating the man looking back. Carter's revelation about Clara had shattered his confidence, exposing the ugliness of his assumptions. He thought of his own grandfather, a Vietnam vet who'd taught him to respect service. How had he strayed so far? The radio crackled with routine calls, but Lawson's mind was elsewhere. He drove to the edge of town where a veterans memorial stood, a granite slab etched with names of Willow Creek's fallen. He parked and stepped out, the night air cool against his flushed skin. His eyes scanned the names, wondering if Clara's brother was among them. Shame choked him, and he sank to his knees, whispering, "Ah." At the same time, Clara opened the mahogany box, revealing the silver star nestled in velvet. Its star-shaped silhouette gleamed under the lamplight, a symbol of sacrifice Marcus could barely comprehend. This is for you, too, she told him, her voice steadier now, to remind you that courage isn't just for battlefields. It's for moments like today, when you stand tall even when the world tries to push you down. Marcus touched the metal reverently, his young face set with determination. I'll make you proud, Mama Clara, he vowed. The next morning, Chief Carter called a department-wide meeting. Standing before his officers, he held up a photo of Clara in her Army uniform, her face radiant with purpose. This is Major Clara Thompson, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She's a hero who served when many wouldn't. Yesterday, one of our own disrespected her. That stops now. He outlined new training, community outreach, and accountability measures. We serve everyone, he thundered, his eyes blazing. No exceptions. Lawson in the back felt every word like a lash, but he nodded, resolved to change. Clara, unaware of the ripples she'd caused, drove Marcus to school, the mahogany box back in its place. As she waved goodbye, a young officer approached. Officer Maria Reyes, a rookie with a kind smile. Major Thompson, she said, saluting. I heard about you. Thank you for your service. Clara's eyes widened, then softened. Thank you, officer, she replied, her voice warm. For the first time in days, she felt seen, but the story wasn't over. Whispers of Clara's encounter spread through Willow Creek, igniting debates at town halls and diner counters. Some defended Lawson, claiming he was just doing his job. Others rallied behind Clara, demanding justice. A local veterans group planned a ceremony to honor her, while Carter pushed for systemic change. Clara, though, wanted only to live quietly, to tend her roses and teach Marcus to be brave. Yet her dignity, tested in that fleeting roadside moment, had sparked a reckoning, one that would challenge Willow Creek to confront its biases and honor its heroes. As Claire stood in her garden that evening, pruning shears in hand, she looked skyward. The stars were emerging, each a pinprick of light against the dark. She thought of Fallujah, of the soldiers she'd saved, of the brother she'd lost. And she thought of Marcus, who'd carry her legacy forward. A tear fell, not of sorrow but of resolve. Keep going, she whispered, her voice a prayer. The world could wound her, but it could never break her. The world just keep wounding her, Not Clara Thompson, not a hero. The morning mist clung to the streets of Willow Creek, Georgia, shrouding the town in a quiet that felt both sacred and uneasy. Clara Thompson stood at her kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of coffee, its warmth a faint comfort against the chill of memory. The events of the past week, Officer Derek Lawson's humiliating stop, Chief Samuel Carter's fierce defense, had stirred something deep within her. At 72, Clara had long buried her warrior's heart beneath the routines of a quiet life, but now it pulsed again, insistent, like a drum calling her to stand tall once more. The mahogany box, now resting on her dining table, seemed to watch her, its silent weight a reminder of battles fought and scars unseen. Across town, Derek Lawson sat in a dimly lit conference room at the Willow Creek Police Department, his uniform feeling tighter than usual. The disciplinary hearing loomed like a storm cloud. Chief Carter's voice from yesterday's meeting still rang in his ears. We serve everyone. No exceptions. Lawson's hands fidgeted with a pen, his mind replaying the moment he'd sneered at Clara, calling her grandma with venom. Shame gnawed at him, but so did a flicker of resentment. He'd been doing his job, hadn't he? Suspicious car, suspicious neighborhood, why was he the villain? Yet the image of Clara's unyielding gaze, her quiet strength, haunted him. He'd misjudged a hero, and the truth of it was a wound he couldn't ignore. The hearing began with Carter presiding, his face carved from stone. Officer Lawson, he began, his voice low but piercing, your actions disrespected not only Major Clara Thompson, but the values this department upholds. Explain yourself. Lawson's throat tightened. I made assumptions, sir. I saw her car, her age, and I thought, he faltered, the words tasting bitter. I was wrong. I didn't know who she was. Carter leaned forward, his eyes like steel. That's the problem, Derek. You didn't see her. You saw what you wanted to see. The room fell silent, the weight of Carter's words sinking into every officer present. Lawson was ordered to undergo 6 weeks of retraining, cultural sensitivity, de-escalation, and veteran awareness, along with a formal apology to Clara in person. He nodded, his jaw tight, but inside a spark of resolve flickered. He wanted to change, to be better, but could he? Clara, meanwhile, prepared for the veterans' ceremony the town had organized in her honor. She had resisted at first, uneasy with the spotlight. I didn't serve for applause, she'd told her grandson Marcus over breakfast, her voice soft but firm. Marcus, his eyes bright with pride, had begged her to go. Mama Clara, people need to know. His words tugged at her heart, and she'd relented, if only to show him that courage wasn't just for battlefields. It was for moments when the world demanded you stand up, even when it hurt. She chose her outfit carefully, a simple navy dress, her silver star pinned discreetly to her chest. The mahogany box would stay home today, its contents too sacred for public display. The ceremony took place at the Willow Creek Veterans Memorial, a granite slab etched with names that gleamed under the midday sun. The crowd was larger than Clara expected, veterans in faded caps, families clutching flags, and curious townsfolk whispering her name. Chief Carter stood at the podium, his voice booming with reverence. Major Clara Thompson is a testament to courage, he said, his gaze sweeping the crowd. She saved lives in Iraq, including my brother's, and she carries that honor with quiet dignity. We are here to right a wrong and to celebrate a hero. The applause was thunderous, but Clara's eyes were on Marcus, who stood in the front row, beaming through tears. As Carter spoke, Lawson watched from the back, his heart pounding. He'd been ordered to attend, to face Clara publicly, but the sight of her, small but radiant, her silver star catching the light, made his chest ache. He'd spent the night researching her, reading accounts of her bravery in Fallujah, how she'd run through gunfire to save wounded soldiers, how she'd stayed calm when shrapnel tore through her leg. The woman he'd mocked was a legend, and he'd treated her like a criminal. When Carter called him forward to apologize, the crowd's murmurs grew sharp, judgmental. Lawson's steps fell heavy, each one a reckoning. Major Thompson, he began, his voice cracking as he faced her. The crowd hushed, the air thick with anticipation. I disrespected you. I judged you without knowing you, and I was wrong. So wrong. His eyes glistened, his voice barely holding. I've got no excuse, but I promise you I'm learning. I'll do better. You deserve that. Clara looked at him, her gaze piercing yet kind, as if she could see the boy beneath the badge. Officer Lawson, she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the crowd. We all make mistakes. What matters is what you do next. See people, not your fears. The crowd erupted in applause, some wiping tears, others nodding in solemn agreement. Lawson stepped back, his head bowed, a mix of shame and hope stirring within him. But the ceremony wasn't the end. As Clara accepted a plaque from the mayor, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A group of protesters, led by a local activist named Tom Hargrove, stood at the edge of the memorial, holding signs, "Support our police," and "Justice for Lawson." Hargrove, a burly man with a megaphone, shouted, "This is a witch hunt! Officer Lawson was just doing his job." The crowd's mood shifted, some cheering Hargrove, others booing. Clara's heart sank. She'd wanted peace, not division, but her story had ignited a fire in Willow Creek. Chief Carter stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. "This isn't about tearing anyone down," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "It's about building a community that honors everyone. Veterans, citizens, officers who learn from their mistakes. Major Thompson deserves our respect, and so does every person who serves this town." His words quelled the tension, but Clara felt the weight of eyes on her, some admiring, some skeptical. She clutched Marcus's hand, drawing strength from his small, warm grip. That evening, Clara sat in her garden, the roses glowing under the moonlight. Marcus was asleep inside, the plaque from the ceremony resting on the mantel. She'd told him more stories of Iraq that afternoon, stories of camaraderie and sacrifice, but also of the prejudice she'd faced as a black woman in the army. "It never stops, does it?" she murmured to the stars, her voice a mix of sorrow and resolve. The town's division worried her. Hargrove's protest had drawn supporters, and whispers of a petition to reinstate Lawson without retraining were spreading. Clara knew her moment of vindication was fragile, a spark that could either ignite change or be snuffed out by resentment. Across town, Lawson sat in his apartment, staring at a letter he'd written to Clara but hadn't yet sent. In it, he poured out his regret, his commitment to change, and a question: how do I earn trust back? He didn't know if he'd send it, but writing it felt like a step toward redemption. His phone buzzed with a text from a colleague. "Hargrove's planning a rally tomorrow. Says you're the victim." Lawson's stomach churned. He didn't want to be anyone's martyr. He wanted to be better. As Clara rose from her garden bench, a distant siren wailed, slicing through the night. She froze, her heart racing with a sudden, inexplicable dread. The sound wasn't unusual in Willow Creek, but tonight it felt like an omen. She glanced at her house where the mahogany box sat, its secrets safe but heavy. Tomorrow she'd face the town again, not as a hero on a pedestal, but as a woman still fighting for respect. The rally loomed, a clash of ideals that could tear Willow Creek apart or force it to confront its soul. Clara's eyes narrowed, her warrior's heart steady. Whatever came next, she'd meet it with the same quiet courage that had carried her through war and prejudice. But what would Willow Creek choose? Division or healing? The answer hung in the air, unresolved, as the siren faded into the night.